Have you ever tried to put one over on somebody, as they say? Maybe you reflect back and you think, yeah, there was this time, and I tried to get away with something that I thought I could get away with and make somebody believe something different than what really happened. And I don't know. Anyway, I've been in that reflective mood and reflecting back over my life a little bit today. And so I raised that question and tell you a little bit about what I've been thinking about. It goes back a lot of years. It's amazing what you can pull forward when you're a 75-year-old, what you can pull forward from your, when you were a 10-year-old or even earlier sometimes. And it seems to, in many cases, serve you well. There must be a reason why you remember things back that far. I recall sitting in it would have been a primary class. I'm not sure what class they called it back then for sure, but probably as an 8 or 9-year-old, maybe an 8-year-old. And I remember the teacher, and I don't remember the teacher's name, but I remember the story that she told. She told a story, and she had pictures. It's easier to captivate your interest if you have pictures to show. So she had pictures to show for this particular story, and I've always been visual anyway. So when she pulled the pictures out and was telling the story, I got interested. She told a story about 3 boys who decided that they, on their way home from some activity, that they would go by the neighbor farm's corn patch and steal some of their corn out of the patch and take it home. And the thing that I remember about the way she told the story, I can still visualize the pole fence around the corn patch. And there was a little gateway into it where they let a couple of the bars down, it looked like. And they were just getting ready to go into the patch. And the story goes this way. One of the boys said, "Stop. Is anybody looking?" Because they didn't want to get caught. And the one boy went over and looked down one side of the patch under the road where they would come from. There was nobody coming that direction. The other boy said, "Stop, we need to check the fence line." He went over on the other side, looked down along the fence line to make sure that there wasn't anybody coming up through the fields or whatever to where the gateway was that they were about to go through. And they were about to proceed into the corn patch. And the third little boy, who I guess had more of a conscience than the others, wasn't buying into it all, asked his own question. And he said, did you think to look up? They looked down both sideways. Did you think to look up? And of course, you know why the teacher included that story. It was designed to help us remember that God is looking down on everything we do, and we're not going to get away with anything. And yet we keep trying, don't we? I guess it's the natural man in us, as the scriptures record. The natural man is an enemy to God. And I don't know why, but I remembered that story all these years, 60 years ago, more than that, 65 almost, 65 years ago or more. Anyway, I don't know why. Have you ever wondered why some things you retain and others you don't? Maybe I've retained it so I could tell it to you tonight. I don't know. But it's been an interesting story that I've recalled at other times in my life, and I'll tell you a couple of them. I remember when I was in high school, and of course, in high school, you always like to, have kind of be one of the gang. Well, myself and some of the athletes after school, it was this time of the year when we were in track and we needed to do some running, but the things were a little muddy, and so we'd try to find a hill or a sidewalk that we could get going on, and we got all dressed into our athletic duds, sweats, and we started out, and it was my final year of high school. I remember that. And I had a car that day at school. I'd come earlier that day to work on I used to drive my car to school when I was a student body president, co-student body president that year, and we had things to work on always early in the morning sometimes. And so I had my car to school that day, which I didn't very often. But on that particular day, I had my car to school. And I mentioned it to some of the guys as we were getting ready to go out for our run. And the coaches had told us where to go and that they'd be there in a little bit and they'd come in their vehicle or whatever. Well, it turned out that we were a little slower getting dressed than normal, I guess. And one of the guys said, "Hey, you've got your car to school today. Why don't we get in your car when we leave here and drive the first 3 blocks so that we don't have to run that far, and that way we can be caught up with the rest of them and nobody will know the difference. And we can just join in at the end of the line, and then when the coaches come, they'll be able to, there won't be any problem, and we'll just look like we were normally there on time, running with everybody else, which we weren't." And you guessed it, I took the bait, and about 4 or 5 of them got in the car, and we sneakily, just like the boys going into the corn patch, we sneakily drove about 3 blocks down through the middle of town and off to the end where we knew the runners were going to be coming by. And then when they came by, we got out of the car, parked it, got out of the car, fell in line and continued to run. And we ran up on a hill that they called M Hill because it kind of overlooked the town. It had a big M on it for the town's name, I guess. Anyway, everything was just fine, went just according to plan. And we went back home, or back to the school after the running was done, and got out of our clothes, and I didn't have to catch the bus. The bus had already gone because I knew I had my car. Well, I went out to get my car, and I had left the keys in it when we stopped it on our little jaunt. And when I went out to get the car, there were no keys in it. And I knew something was amiss. I probably should have kept the keys out, but I'm an old country boy, and we didn't have to worry about cars getting stolen so much back in those days. So I just left them in all the time. Well, I put my thinking cap on a little bit and tried to figure out what had happened, where they could be. I searched the car and couldn't find anything. Looked in my pockets to see if I hadn't put them in my pockets. No, they weren't there. So then I went back to the high school, into the locker room, and I could hear the coaches talking in the coaching office. And I could hear them talking about my car keys. And they didn't know I was even in the locker room. But I could hear them talking about my car keys, and I knew what had happened. They had caught on to our little trick, and without saying a word, they knew how to get us, or get me. And there was me and one other boy that was going to ride home from school with me. And so I sat in that locker room and tried to think, let's see, how am I going to get out of this one? How am I going to pull this off without getting caught like the corn people? Boys had thought through their mistakes. I thought through this one, but it wasn't God that caught me this time. It was the coach. But I was caught, and I pretty soon just had to go in and say, hey, I can't find my car keys. Have any of you seen my car keys? And you can just imagine the smiles on their faces. They didn't say anything. They just leaned back in their chairs, put their hands behind their head, looked at me, and said, you missing your car keys? When did you have your car last? So then I had to start making up a story, you see. Well, I don't want to belabor you with the ins and outs of the conversation, but they finally conceded, gave me my car keys back, but not before. They didn't rake me over the coals verbally, and they didn't really give me any lapsed around or physical punishments. But oh man, did I ever take it mentally before they conceded that they had the car keys and they were onto my little trick. Well, I'm going to leave that story now. You'll see where these stories kind of all add together here in a minute. Because I've got one more to tell you that's carried on with me for, holy cow. I got thinking it's been 50, not quite. Yeah, about 50 years. About 50 years. Let me tell you the story. I'm going to have to confess some things as I did with the other story. But I built my house in Lake Town. It wasn't an expensive house back in those days. You'd be shocked to know that I only paid $24,000 for the house, and we thought it was an exorbitant amount, and we'd never make the payments. But we finally did it. And I built a little garage on the side of it eventually. As an add-on, that was several years later. But my wife wanted a little garden shed, which we got. And she wanted a little rock pathway out to the garden shed. Just some little flat stones to step on so you didn't get your feet muddy if you went out to the shed to get something. And she kept asking me about it. And so I started becoming a little inquisitive and figured out, well, let's see if I'm going to do this the way she wants. I'm going to have to find some round, flat stones. I guess you can buy those. I don't know. I wasn't much of a city person, so I didn't know. But I asked around over to the school where I was working, and a few people, and they said, oh yeah, I know where you can get some round, flat stones. Down at the beach on the west side of Bear, or the east side of Bear Lake, there's a place where they call Cisco Beach, and if you go down there, there's some flat stones, and there's quite a few of them. You could just get some down there. Well, it turns out that I went down, yeah, there was round flat stones down there. Quite a few of them off on the side of the beach. And I thought, well, I'll just go down there and get them like these people said. The only problem is that between the time I asked them and I started to ask them around a little bit, and they said, oh, it actually is on state ground. Therefore, you would have to get permission from the state, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't let you. And I thought, and you know where this story's going, don't you? I succumbed to the temptation. And I took my old GMC truck down there, and about just before it got dark. Can you guess why I did it then? Because I didn't want anybody to see me. Anyway, it was before it got dark, and I started gathering these round, flat stones. And I started putting them in my truck. And every time I would put in a round, flat stone, I would look both ways up the road to make sure nobody was coming. Then I would put that round, flat stone in the truck. Go get another one. And that time of the night, there wasn't much traffic, but I remember looking up the road one way, then the other way, kind of like the boys with the corn patch story. And I just kept putting the round, flat stones in until I figured I had enough to do the job. And then I got in my truck, started the engine, and pulled out onto the road. And nobody was coming. Nobody had seen me. And I was cleared to go home. Except just like the little boy in the corn patch, I forgot to look up. I looked both ways on the road, but I forgot to look up. And I had no idea how important that little step is. Because I went home and I cleared the ground. My wife I didn't even tell her where I'd got them or anything about it, but she was so pleased to get them and praised me and said, oh, that's going to look so nice. And when she found out that I had enough to finish it, and it would be a smooth little walkway out there with these round, flat stones. And I filled them in with sand, and it just looked so good. Except every time I'd look at the stones, I'd remember how I got them. And that it was kind of a conniving, deceitful, dishonest pathway. I never did really enjoy that pathway because of that. Every time I'd walk out to the shed, I'd see the round, flat stones. I'd remember the experience of loading them in my truck and the deceit that was involved. And it bothered me. Now you're going to say, well, I'm sure you took them back and put them on the beach. No, I didn't. Partly, I guess, because I didn't know where to get any more, and my wife really liked them. And besides that, I ended up selling the property, and they were no longer under my control. But I've often thought back, I wish I had that to do over again. I wish I had that to do over again, because the way that I had acquired those stones, being deceitful and in my mind dishonest, I was never really fully able to enjoy them. I'd have been much better off to have got a job and earned some extra money find some way to go buy some round flat rocks at the hardware store somewhere and bring them home and use that. But I didn't. And I can't really explain why, except that, well, there's no excuse. There's no sense in me making an excuse, because there isn't any. But I've used the experience to teach others and help others, and that's what I wish to do with this YouTube upload tonight, is convey to you that if you're ever in a situation like that where you have to be deceitful to do something, you better rethink it, because you're going to pay a price for it, and it's going to be a heavy price. It might just be a price that rides around in your memory, and you might think, well, I can deal with that. But when it just never goes away, then can you deal with it? We need to ask ourselves that question. I didn't look up. I should have asked the question that the little boy asked in the cornfield. Did you think to look up? But I didn't until it was too late. And like I said, I don't own the property anymore. And so I use that as an excuse, but maybe someday I'm gonna have to figure it out. I've repented for it. I've asked for forgiveness. But I need to do more. And so it's still there. It's still there in my mind after all these years. I'm sure nobody missed the rocks at the beach. I'm sure lots of other people have done and would have done the same thing. That doesn't make it any better in my mind. Just because somebody else does it or did it or said I could when they didn't have the authority doesn't seem to ease the burden that comes with retaining a memory like that, even though you've taken it to the Lord. Now, maybe I need to learn something more about forgiving yourself. I don't know. I'm sure there's something to that, because I've often said that guilt is not a bad thing. Guilt is a good thing, because that's the first step to the path backwards, back where you need to be. So guilt is a good thing. I do believe that. And I'm not going to belabor this point anymore. You can tell it's still kind of unresolved in my mind, and yet I feel out of control, but it still seems unresolved. The reason, again, that I mention it is because you don't have to get in that situation. I've used that as a stepping stone. Pun's not intended, but I've used that as a stepping stone to take me to a different place when I had those kinds of decisions to make, whenever I was forgetting to look up, thinking that I was getting away with something, when I knew darn well, because of experiences like that I wasn't getting away with anything. And the more I've learned about Jesus Christ and the suffering that went into the atonement, which I like to think of as at-one-ment, because that's the purpose of all of that. In Gethsemane and on Golgotha, the suffering is to get us back into the presence of the Lord. And in order to do that, from my understanding, I have to be justified. That's a term, a doctrinal term that I can't get into tonight, maybe some other time. But basically, it's a term that means guiltless. Guiltless. You have to be justified with the Lord. And He is merciful. He extends forgiveness. He can erase our sins. He understands us. He's felt our pains. He's felt my guilt. But I have to be justified. Well, I don't mean to go any longer tonight on that particular thing, but you're going to find, just like I did with my driving and car key experience and the round flat rocks. The round flat rocks have been a springboard to me, more so than the car keys, because the coaches were enjoying that too much. But I'm not so sure that the Lord enjoyed the round flat rock experience with me. I'm sure He felt what I was feeling. I'm sure He wanted to extend His mercy and did. I think He has accepted my apologies. He's heard me ask for forgiveness. And I'm trying to determine if I'm justified. Well, that's the state of affairs. I mention it because I don't want you to have to start down a road that you're going to have a hard time following. Eventually, you're going to have to turn around and back up and make things right, just like I'm going to have to. So it's best not to start down the road of deceit and avoid the round, flat rocks in your life when you find them, because they haunt you. I love you just the same. Pray for me. I'll be okay. We'll get it. We'll figure this round, flat rock thing out. But in the meantime, use it to your benefit. Okay? Good night.